Howdy, world culture students. Let's talk about Hinduism. Get myself out of the way here. Oh, there we go. Okay, first off, I want to talk about some ways that Hinduism is unlike Islam and Christianity, the two religions that you're probably most familiar with. First off, there is no single founder of Hinduism. Hinduism is a very old religion, and it appears to have developed out of the beliefs and practices of the people who have lived in the Indian subcontinent. And there was never any single person like Muhammad or like Jesus Christ who can be said to be the founder of Hinduism. There have been important important Hindu teachers, of course, who have been very influential in shaping the Hindu religion, but you can't say that there was ever anybody who started it. There is also no central authority or organization. There is no equivalent of the Muslim caliph, for example, or Christian bishops, or Christian denominations. There are groups of Hindus that believe and practice the same types of things, but there's not the formal structure that you're going to find in Islam and Christianity. There is no single main religious book like the Bible or the Quran. There are several important religious books in Hinduism, but no single one is considered to be absolutely authoritative. And different Hindus are going to emphasize different religious books in different ways. And there is no fixed creed. There is no basic set of beliefs that all Hindus believe in. Nothing like the 5 pillars of Islam, or nothing like a basic list of Christian doctrines, such as the existence of God, the divinity of Christ, the resurrection of Christ, the crucifixion of Jesus for our sins. There's nothing like that in Hinduism. You can think of Hinduism instead as being a way of thinking about reality more than a particular set of beliefs and practices. There's tremendous variety within Hinduism, but within that variety, there are basic similarities in the way that Hindus think about what's real and the way the world is. So let's look at this Hindu view of reality by looking at the Hindu concepts of God. The first thing you need to know about that is that there isn't one. There is no single Hindu concept of God. There are many different ways of expressing a Hindu view of God. What they have in common is the idea that there is a universal spirit called Brahman. And Brahman is everywhere and in everything, but not in the same way that Christians believe that God is omnipresent and omnipotent, for example. Hindus believe that Brahman is everywhere because he is not simply located everywhere, but he is the same thing as everywhere. He and everywhere are identical. He is not in everything because he is present in everything. He is everything. He is identical to everything. There's a sense in which Brahman is synonymous with reality. It's a spiritual reality that everything else is part of. And there are lots of different ways you can think about this, which is why there are several Hindu concepts of God. Some Hindus could be considered essentially atheists because they don't believe in Brahman or in any God as any kind of distinct entity. They don't believe in God so much as they believe in the universe. I mean, of course, the universe exists, reality exists, but there is no entity beyond the universe. So there's a sense in which you could say, well, then that's the same thing as not believing in any God at all. You could also look at this concept of Brahman as being a form of monotheism, the belief in one God. Well, there's one universal spirit. So that sounds like one God to me. So you could look at it that way. Or you can look at it in a polytheistic way, because many Hindus believe that Brahman takes many forms, each of which have their own functions. And you can think of these different forms of the universal spirit as individual deities in and of themselves. For example, there is Vishnu, the preserver, one of the most important manifestations of Brahman. So if something needs to be preserved, well, that's what Vishnu does. Siva, the destroyer. If something needs to be destroyed, well, that's what Siva does. There's the goddess Saraswati, a goddess of knowledge. And these are just three of the literally millions of examples of Hindu deities, different manifestations of the universal spirit that could be considered individual gods and goddesses on their own. Another important concept in Hinduism is the concept of reincarnation. And as we talk about these concepts, I want you to think about how they're all related to each other. So the concept of reincarnation flows out of the concept of Brahman as a universal spirit. If you think of Brahman as being the spiritual reality that is behind every other reality, that is, that every other form of reality is simply an expression of, well, that's true of your soul as well. It's true of any person's soul. So when a person dies, their soul continues to exist because it's part of reality, which is all part of this universal spirit. And it is simply going to move on to its next manifestation, to its next form. And ultimately, what Hindus are striving towards is a complete unity with Brahman, a state in which there is no longer anything to distinguish me from the universal spirit behind all of reality. Kind of like a raindrop falling into the ocean. The raindrop and the ocean have kind of sort of always been the same thing, but when the raindrop finally falls into the ocean, then any distinction between the raindrop and the ocean is dissolved. And they have been completely reunited with each other. And that is ultimately what Hindus hope to see happen with their own souls. It's interesting, to contrast this concept with our hope as Christians. As Christians, we believe that our individuality will never be extinguished. We will always continue to exist. I will always be me, and you will always be you. What we're looking forward to is the complete fulfillment of what God intended for us when He made us as individuals. And we don't look forward to a unity with God in the sense of being extinguished and made indistinguishable from God. What we look forward to is a unity with God in the sense of being in perfect fellowship with Him, living in worship to Him, and finally finding our fulfillment in what God created for us as individuals. So, reincarnation and Dharma. Now, the connection between reincarnation and Dharma, you're going to have to wait a little bit before you can see that, but keep in mind, Brahman, reincarnation. Dharma is the proper way of living for each creature. So every creature is a manifestation of the ultimate reality, and each manifestation has the ways that it should behave. So a tree should like stand there and be a tree, right? A tree shouldn't like start running around or something. That would be improper for a tree. I, as a teacher, should teach, and I should be a good teacher. If I would try to be a welder, for example, that probably would not turn out very well. And it's not that there's anything wrong with being a welder, it's just not something that I am suited for. And Dharma takes this distinction and raises it to a level of morality, essentially. Morality is not so much a concept of right and wrong arising out of the character of God, which is what we believe as Christians. Dharma is about what is proper under the current circumstances. So a cow and a snake, let's say, or a person for that matter, they all have proper ways of living. It could be proper, for example, for a snake to swallow mice. It would be improper for me or for a cow to swallow mice. It would be proper for a cow to moo. It would be improper for a snake or for me to moo. And it's not that there's something wrong with eating mice or mooing or anything. It's just not the proper function of the form that I am currently taking. Which brings us to karma. Karma is the concept of cause and effect in Hinduism. And I should say, many of these concepts are also found in Jainism, kind of a smaller offshoot of Hinduism, and in Buddhism, which began, again, as an offshoot from Hinduism. So you'll find similar concepts there, even though they eventually developed into distinct religions. So karma. Karma is about consequences. It's about cause and effect. And it's symbolized by this endless knot here. You see that this knot, everything's connected to everything else, and it just keeps going on forever. So when I do something, my action has a consequence. And that consequence has its own consequence, which has its own consequence, and it just keeps going on forever that way. Cause and effect is this endless, ultimately an endless loop, really. One thing leading to the next thing. And what we should do, according to the teachings of Hinduism, is live according to our dharma. We should live in a way that is appropriate for the form that we currently have. If we do that, then when we are reincarnated, then we will become reincarnated in a higher form than the form we currently have. We will be closer to being completely united with the ultimate spiritual reality. So if I am a low status person right now, I live according to my dharma as I should, then I will be reborn as a higher status person. So right now I may simply be a lowly farmer or something. If I am a good lowly farmer, if I live appropriately for a lowly farmer, perhaps I'll come back as a priest who is closer to being completely united with Brahman. But if I do not behave appropriately, then there will be bad consequences, and I will be reborn as someone with even lower status, not a farmer, but perhaps some kind of slave or even an animal or something like that. Which brings us to the concept of caste. Castes and subcastes are the social divisions within Hinduism based on concepts of purity and pollution. So there are some things that are considered ritually clean or dirty. So being a farmer, for example, I mean, that's obviously dirty. It's literally dirty in the sense that you do things in the dirt, and there's nothing wrong with that. And even within Hinduism, there's nothing wrong with that. But that involvement with these material things, it keeps you from attaining that spiritual purity that will reunite you with spiritual reality. So if that's the status that you find yourself in, well, okay, you go ahead and do that. But a priest, for example, he's going to have to stay away from like mucking around in the dirt, or even associating too closely in the wrong ways with people who do that. The rules about castes and what's considered proper in ways that people in different castes relate to each other, they're very strict. And here are the main castes. And notice there are 5 main categories in the caste system, and then subcategories within those. Starting at the top, Brahmins or priests. And then this word that I'm not going to try to pronounce. Whenever I try to pronounce it, then I always feel like I fail. So anyways, the warrior and noble class, Vaishyas, farmers and craftsmen, Shudras, who are servants. And then you'll notice down here at the bottom, we have the Dalits, or untouchables. These are people who are considered to be outside of the caste system. They are literally off the chart. That's how low they are. And you'll notice also that this chart is color-coded. It appears that the highest castes are mostly the descendants of the Aryans who invaded India around 1500 BC, and that the lower castes and the Dalits are the descendants of the Dravidians that the Aryans conquered, and that the caste system may be a surviving manifestation of Aryan attempts to subjugate the people that they conquered. And your caste is going to have tremendous impacts on your life. For one thing, it's something you're born into. You can't change it. There's literally nothing you can do about your caste in the life that you're currently living. You're born into it and you're stuck there. And that's going to determine the occupations that are considered acceptable for you, the degree of education that you're able to get, who you're allowed to marry, your relationships with other people. These are all determined by your caste. And I should say that caste is less important in India and in Hinduism than it used to be. It still is a factor in the lives of people in India. But its impact on people's lives has been weakened. If I understand correctly, discrimination against people on the basis of caste has been outlawed in India, but you know how that is. You know, people are still mean to each other if they think that you're the wrong kind of person. So it's still definitely a reality today. One more thing I want to point out about the teachings of Hinduism, the concept of karma. Well, first off, the way that karma and dharma and caste and reincarnation, these are all related to each other. So whatever caste you find yourself in, you should live appropriately for your caste. That would be living properly according to the dharma that goes along with your caste. And if you do that, that's good karma. And that's going to, turn my phone off here. And that's going to lead to good consequences for your spirit in the next life. You will be reborn closer to Brahman than you used to be. I'm thankful, though, for the concept of grace, which is not something that you find in Hinduism in the same way that you find in Christianity. The Bible does teach something similar to karma. Cause and effect is real. When we do bad things, there are bad consequences. When we do good things, there are good consequences. But the Bible teaches, and I think we've all found this to be true in our experience, that we can never do enough good things and a small enough number of bad things to make the consequences turn out in our favor. That's the reality of human sinfulness. We need the grace of God to empower us to rise above cause and effect, to become the people that God intended us to be. Well, that'll be all for today. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on InstaSnap. See ya!